Rafa may have to board a plane, so I'm going to be leading the meeting.
That
There's Ralph.
Is it?
I guess we can call the meeting to order, Rafa.
Everybody's in summer mode, except us.
So let's call the meeting to order. The time is 12:04. Let's see. We're still missing a couple, but we're still missing Ray, but we'll call him in once he's here. So roll call. Cesar Garay,
Present.
John Villarreal,
Here.
Arturo Dominguez,
Here.
Rafael Dueñas.
Here, I'll have to be excused early.
No worries. Julian Rotnovsky, I'm here. George Altgeld,
Present.
Elia Guevara. Yeah, that's hard for me. Sorry. Mayra Hernandez, so not present, and then Ray Rocha.
not here.
Okay. Let me move over. I'm doing this on my computer. So, do we go through citizen comments since we do not have quorum?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We don't have any anyway, but that's a good point you bring up, Julian. We want to check that out in the event that it does happen and we do have public comment, how we proceed with that.
Okay. So we're just going to move over to action items, but no action can be taken since quorum has not been met. But I'll read them out. This is discussion and possible action regarding the City of Laredo TERS policy. So the update that I can give on that, let me pull up my meeting notes, is so we met with the consultant that was brought on by the city, and I'm going to try to summarize this the best I can, but he was very helpful at pretty much determining that he's not who we need initially to develop the TERS policy. He specializes in just the legal side of the whole thing. So what he was expecting is for us to essentially say, this is exactly how the policy, should look like. This is what we should incentivize. And these are the incentives we're trying to do. And then he would essentially draft that into a legal document. So he said that's way too early for him. And the discussion that was had with the group was how when we were moving on creating a TERS policy, the idea was that there would need to be studies done. We would have to organize all the organizations out there when it comes to the trade organizations. We also discussed how there needed to be a cluster analysis so we know what we want to try to bring on when we develop TERS policies. So in my meeting notes, I have meet with stakeholders, organize other economic development organizations, trade organizations, and collect data, reach out to the community on what they're looking for when it comes to types of jobs they'd like to see brought in through the TERS policy, and find out the housing needs for the community. A lot of cities use TERS policies to also develop housing. So that was another thing that was brought up, but I'll allow at this moment anyone that was part of the subcommittee to speak on their behalf if they'd like to add anything that I may have missed.
Yeah, I think you captured it accurately. The lawyer provided by the city is familiar with the concept of TERS, and with I guess their statutory framework and the finer points of negotiating one perhaps. But as far as the assembly and drafting of a TERS policy relevant to Laredo's geography, socioeconomic, demographics, border trade, you know, a dying downtown, you know, sprawling, you know, suburbs and all the other, you know, how to invigorate local businesses, small businesses, big businesses, with incentives to, you know, to intelligently grow into sectors that are consistent with our comp plan. And he was the first one to say, "Hey, yeah, no, I'm the wrong guy." I once you guys have the you know, all the little details, you know, mapped out, then come back and see me, and we can uh, put that policy into a legal framework so that if a would-be developer wants to do a project, they, you know, here are the parameters, and those parameters are consistent with the authority provided under the statute. So we're kind of back to square one, and that happens a lot of time. I get that, you know, a lot of people, oh, you're a lawyer, you know how to do wills and estates and litigate, you know, commercial real estate matters and intellectual property. It's like, no, 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 no. These are these really small spheres that we operate in, and these other areas are for other people, lay people and policy wonks, you know, to figure out. So the ball's back in our court. It would be good, I think, for us to have a you know, a you know, certified economic development wizard who is familiar with how cities, and who has not only familiar with, let me walk that back, who is an expert with experience in the field of helping cities draft policies relevant to their specific needs. That's really what we need. We need a craftsman who can help us assemble this, you know, very specific policy.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
I know I've been in the EDAC for, gosh, 12 years, but I know that the NEZ, we use the Fort Worth, and we use some other NEC policies. I know in the Chapter 380, we used El Paso, we used Corpus. I think we also used Fort Worth. So I don't know if we can get our hands on some other city policies so we can sort of get like a framework, and then, you know, from there, maybe we can get a consultant, but I think we might be able to, and it's more work on us, and maybe the tourist policy is more complex than the NEZ and then the Chapter 380, but y'all give me your take on that.
Can we recognize Mr. Rocha?
So
Oh.
you don't have, hello,
Yes.
you don't have to make a motion. Staff knows what we need to do, because I know that you don't have a quorum. So we'll go ahead, staff will start looking at different cities who do have that and bring it forward to you all.
Escalera, if I may, and Miriam, I mean, you were at that meeting as well. Mr. Ria was there with us, along with Julian and George, and Rafa, Aaron and Mr. Villarreal. But the takeaway from there was that the subcommittee would bring back some ideas to develop a scope of work in order to go out for an RFQ or an RFP, to kind of get an idea of what that RFP would look like, to get a professional to submit back on what their qualifications are to put it together, do the outreach, and all that kind of stuff.
So yes, that's what I read out loud at the beginning of the whole thing. Do the cluster analysis. If one has not been done, meet with stakeholders. These are all the things that someone that can craft a policy like this would need to do, and I can share those notes. I opened it up to all the subcommittee members to add any items if they wished. I'm not sure if what was added or not. My only caution is it's really easy to this is This is policy, not framework. It's very easy to get another city's framework and just put in there what we think is best. I think that's the whole idea with actually hiring someone on determining where our dollars should be spent when it comes to the development of a policy. Yes, Arturo.
Julian. Okay, Julian, you think the subcommittee can meet again with John Gonzalez from LC? He has a certification. He's certified in economic development. Maybe Michael, I'm sorry, Michael Gonzalez.
Michael,
Maybe we can start there. We can start with him. He's good. I told him that he should come to our meetings at least to hear as public.
We could. I just don't think we can task him with doing a cluster analysis. He doesn't work for the city. I'm all for meeting with him. I just don't. I'm not sure how that moves us anywhere closer to, doing the outreach, collecting the data, possibly doing a cluster analysis study, which is very, very important. When I looked at San Antonio's, all of their policy is cites studies they did. We're targeting this because this is what we collected here. We're targeting this industry because we see we have like clusters in this, and this. If we can't cite those things, we are flying completely blind in developing a policy.
At least recommendations. He can probably help us with something.
Yeah, no. I do think we should have another meeting, or at least a final meeting so we can provide the city exactly what the ask is. Since last meeting was predominantly spent on trying to see if we could use who the city hired initially. So we should set up another. Rosario, you're shaking your head. Comments?
Eventually, he's gonna be hired to finish or do the legal work.
Oh,
Yeah, but he
okay.
was,
Who are you talking? Are you talking about the legal attorneys? Or are you talking about prior to that?
I'm talking about the meeting that we had with the legal attorney.
Oh, okay, then that's fine. Yeah, I was thinking with that other firm we had hired that we paid a whole bunch of money and didn't deliver.
No.
Are you talking about Angelou?
Angelou, yes.
Yeah, so Angelou, this is my take on Angelou. Angelou helped us with the comp plan and painted in very broad brushstrokes for what we needed to do to take it to the next step. And then we actually hired him again, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong here, Rosario, to kind of give us a little bit more direction. And it ended up being kind of a repeat of what his original discussion was for purposes of the comp plan. And so we ended up not really with anything coming to we ended up with nothing, I guess, is kind of my takeaway from that. But if you could take the foundational component of his knowledge and then overlay the lenses of Laredo's very specific economic development needs and what we need to incentivize, then we have the makings of a tourist policy that will encourage the type of growth that we know we can thrive in, and we know we need to diversify into. And so, yeah, both with all respect to Mr. Henry and Mr. Angelou, one of them was so much of a generalist that it wasn't necessarily helpful for what we're trying to do right now. And then the other, Mr. Henry, was, well, I mean, he's a lawyer. He's not a policy guy. So we need, I think, to Julian's point, like, we need the requisite studies, the local studies. For instance, when that Harvard fellow came down and looked at our demographics as it relates to single moms and where they're at and what we can do to help them. Like we had a study. We know that they need help with after school care, transportation, to and from work and school, etc. We had a study we could cite to say this is the path forward. We don't have that study here. We are to Julian's point. I mean, we're just kind of flying blind, and there's where someone who can come in, or a firm or whomever, can do stage the charrettes, gather the data, and then talk to the transportation sector, talk to the health sector, talk to the small business communities, and have put together data that we can then use as a basis to incentivize what types of economic development we want to go into. If we don't have the data, we're just flying blind.
So would you say that the next step will be to schedule a subcommittee meeting just so that we can form a timeline, work frame to move forward?
I think, I mean, I would hope that, and I know we can't, take any action or whatever, and we can have that, whether TOMA is applicable to the scenario or not. It's very academic and whatever. But I think
Subcommittee can meet if they like.
I think that management can take away from this conversation that it's council's long overdue for going out for an RFQ. I think it would be an RFQ, not an RFP, an RFQ to really find a firm that can multiple firms that can audition for their ability to help us put together a meaningful economic development policy that addresses, and also we're saying TERS, but 380s, all the other economic development tools as it relates to our downtown, the industrial districts, we should have a health district, or a health campus, someone who can take what Angelou and the city did in its comp plan, those general brushstrokes, and then mold that into very targeted areas of economic growth, and give us a roadmap on how to make that manifest. I think it would be great if management could just run with that and see if they can get council to say, yeah, let's do it.
I was thinking more with Michael is giving the city, look, this is the people that you should hire.
I was looking back at Angelou's contract for this particular item. In 2019, 2018, 2019, we had a $50,000 contract with him. And so then we got into some kind of issues because he wasn't really producing. He was just billing us on a monthly basis. And there's a series of emails where we're asking him for information. He's not providing. So we paid a total of $36,000 for zero work.
Yeah, well, let's not do that again.
Yeah, not again.
I don't think anyone on this committee is recommending or pushing for Angelou
No.
economics.
No, I
Yeah,
don't think so either. It's something we'll have to take to council, like you said, hopefully within that type of a price range. I'm not sure how much they run.
I have no idea, to be honest.
That's why I'm recommending talking to Michael first.
Yeah, to get a baseline of, okay, well, what's the scope of work and what's it going to cost? I mean,
Recommends any firms that he heard. I mean, try to do our homework before we at least give council or the city, this is what we would like for you to do. So that
We can invite him to the subcommittee meeting.
yeah,
I see.
I think that's actually a great idea. so that we're not just kind of, because now we're just kind of like, throwing darts in the night, hoping to hit the dartboard, right? So I think that's a great idea, Arturo.
Okay, so our next step will be to schedule a subcommittee meeting and we
Yes.
invite Michael.
He said anytime that he would meet with us anytime, and he would like to get invited to these meetings as well.
You got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to say anything else before we move on to item B? Okay, so moving on to item B, overview of the NEZ from the building department with discussion and possible action. I don't have any updates on this. I put it on there because we've been kind of waiting to hear back since that meeting that we had with the city manager and other members of the building department. So,
Help me out. What did you need from them so that I could go ahead and follow up?
it was the update. So EDAC passed twice at this point, the updated neighborhood empowerment zone policy, which didn't obviously perfectly align with how the cities currently function and all the legal language. So what the city was supposed to do is essentially translate that document into something that can actually be that can be taken action on at a city council meeting.
Still confused. Help.
So for example, we changed the NEZ policy to remove, like, you can't use the NEZ policy to go do a car wash. Technically, under the statute, you're kind of really stepping over the line on how an NEZ should be used. And apparently, there were
So
like
what you're saying is
four-
there was changes to the policy that haven't been done.
there's changes to the policy that EDAC recommended for the city to
Look at.
look at, well, not just look at, because I do feel like we're crossing a line to the state statute when you have car washes qualifying. Neighborhood empowerment zones should mainly be used to target housing. And we had a lot of commercial. Now, there's nothing wrong with mixed use, housing and commercial. So we kind of defined that in the new updated kind of parameters that we were giving. So we basically did almost like a cheat sheet of
Okay.
what we were looking for. And I know that was given to Keith and other
Okay. So
cities.
if we have it, or who has, does EDAC, Economic Development Department have it?
I can, yes, we already approved it. I can just forward it
Okay.
off to you.
I'll follow up for the next
Have
meeting.
it. Okay. Do you want me to send it to you
If you
also?
can, that'd be great. Yes.
Okay, that's no problem.
This is Roland with Building Development Services. I'm the one that runs the Neighborhood Empowerment Zone. The resolution that established the NEZ does not speak to, it just speaks commercial use. It doesn't speak to what the parameters as far as what businesses can and can't. It just talks about capital investment, meeting the threshold of capital investment to qualify for an NEZ project. So we have not gotten any council action to redo this. So I guess what Mr. Robnowski is implying that based on the recommendation from EDAC to take it to council and ask for a relook at the resolution and modify it.
Well, if I can modify what you said slightly, actually, council did take action and sent it to EDAC so we can update it. And it has not been taken back to them. So they actually requested for it to be updated. And they requested for EDAC to give some recommendations on that, at which we did. And it hasn't gone anywhere since then. It was a motion by Alyssa Cigar. I think it was Alyssa Cigarroa's item, but I know it was discussed upon and voted on for us to basically give the recommendations on what needs to be changed, and it being then sent back to council. And we already made our recommendations. We gave it to staff. It hasn't been given back to council with our recommendations.
Well, I see on April 6th, it says council member Vidal, and I'm getting this off of the agenda minutes for council, but Vidal Rodriguez had an item to extend the NEZ into District 3. And then on that, it was recommended, a motion to present the NEZ policy to the EDAC for possible recommendations and changes. And then June 21st, 2021, it went back to council members. You're right, Julian, it requested a status update on the proposed improvements. And then Teclo at the time, we had already scheduled Mr. Pinzon to come to present to EDAC on July the 8th. And then
Which he
September
did
9th.
present that to us because that's when he showed us like a montage of car washes that were approved.
And then September 9th, you presented the one-page draft kind of update policy to the committee.
Yes.
And I think did you go to council, Julian, one time to present kind of what the one-pager was? We couldn't really find anything there. I remember.
No, it was never, no, I went to council to mention that we were working on it because Alyssa put it back on the agenda. It was something, you're right, it was something started with Vidal to do updates. And I think actually Rafa initially, the one that's put it up on our agenda. When Alyssa put it back up, that's when we finally were moving closer to creating that draft. And that's why I went to council, was to just update them that we're currently working on it. And then we completed that later on. So that's where we're at now. We kind of handed it off to staff and
Julian, as far as the policy, there is, as on the policy number 6, ineligible projects, and it does list 13 of them. And I guess car washes is not there, but you know, it's sexually oriented businesses, non-residential, mobile structures, tattoo parlors, slot machine businesses. So
yeah.
so I don't know from there if we want to just amend the policy to include, I mean, if there's other businesses that you feel are not in the spirit of the NEZ.
Well, that was already in what we approved as EDAC. We had those in that one pager that showed other properties to be included. So that's already, I don't think we have to redo that again. I think that was already in the policy that we approved.
I don't quite understand. So
The recommendation.
I'm sorry?
you mean the recommendation to add, so like we've got the policy here that has these ineligible projects. So you're gonna, I guess, amend it to include additional project.
We've already done that. I'm not making any new recommendations. We as EDAC already passed our recommendations. The reason this is on the agenda was because we're trying to get a staff report update on when those are going to be taken to council. So we don't have to do anything. We've already done what we needed to do.
And so Rosario, what we need to do is go to legal to make sure that it is in accordance with the state statute of the NEZ prior to, to know, once we bring it up to city council,
Okay, so I guess what we need to do is work on a timeline and deadline for us to bring it back to city council based, or if there's any major changes or differences from what EDAC's recommending and the city may be recommending, we come back to them. And if not, then we take it to council. So let's come up with a timeline, and so that we all know what date we're shooting for to take back.
That sounds good. How much time do you think the city needs to?
We're working like with 3 attorneys for the entire city. So, Roland, I mean,
I can
how
meet
many
with
changes,
Mr.
how many,
Caballero.
huh?
I can meet with Mr. Caballero and just go over in the spirit of what the neighborhood empowerment zone was created to the recommendations that are submitted by the EDAC. And then, if they're okay with it, if legal's okay with it, then we could,
If there's nothing significant, hopefully 45 days? Would that be good or no?
yes, I think
Yep.
it's.
If not, we'll
Okay.
come back to you and tell you, there's these issues to work through.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to say anything regarding item B on the NEZ?
I'm not sure if you wanna go ahead and talk
Wait.
about the presentation and that.
Wait, Julian, can you email it again just to refresh our memory?
Yes, that's no problem. I'll send it to the entire committee.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I can present to you data, the recent trends.
I can look at it.
Also, there is the way the map says on the NEZ. For instance, not all of Western Division is on the NEZ. And so there's been some customers that, why can't I do the NEZ here? You know, it's just as bad as where you're saying your map is. And our answer's always been, you're not on the map, you don't qualify. So that was something that also was brought up, so to kind of relook at the map, but I don't know if the committee wants to recommend that as well.
I thought we did, because that was brought up at one of our meetings. I guess at this point, 6 months ago, where we were discussing housing. And I know Rafa brought up to make sure that like little houses would be able to count. And I know we put that into that policy that we submitted to the city.
Oh, it is? Okay, I don't remember.
Yes, but just, we had a meeting with, I don't know her exact title, but she worked for Fort Worth, and typically NEZ policies are updated, the map, every 1 to 2 years. And the reason behind that is when they work and areas are no longer blighted, you're supposed to remove them off the map. Or there are areas that become blighted that you may want to add. So it's not unusual to change that map every, couple of years.
And it should be sort of like with a comprehensive plan, these things should be dynamic, should be changing. through
Exactly.
time. I think that's a very good project for all these things for us to undertake as a committee.
And when was the last time that the maps were reviewed, if I may ask?
Probably never.
But there was some changes, there was some additions, right? Like I know on
Yes.
Highway 83 and some of the areas in the south were added.
There were a lot of additions since the creation of the NEZ. The problem is the way that it reads. There's a lot of additions that is just raw land and like swatches of raw land, and that should not be the case. You don't use NEZs to develop raw areas. Funny thing, because we discussed it today, we use TERS policies. You can use a TERS policy to develop raw land. That's very much true. So I know one of the concerns of the building department was that there was areas that should not be in the NEZ, and they do need to be trimmed out because it does go against what Texas was using NEZs for. They're for blighted existing neighborhoods, not to create new ones.
That's correct. But to answer your question, Miriam, it was when District 3 was added to the NEZ, which was about 3 years ago.
Would anyone else like to say anything regarding B?
No, sir.
Well,
How about getting closer? This is good.
so moving to adjournment, there doesn't really need to be a vote because the meeting never technically officially started.
Right.
But thank you everyone for being here. Rosario, I'll send you over that email, and I'll also send everyone on EDAC that same item.
Thank you.
Juliana?
Thank you.
Thank
George,
you, everyone.
Bye.
Caesar, Rosario, thank you.
So I don't know.
Thank you all. Sorry, I you know, barely joining, so, but we'll get it done.
Glad to have you here, Rosario. Thanks for
Yes,
joining
thank
us.
Nice
you.
seeing you all.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
I just Googled